Greetings and welcome. My name is Sharon Barner, and for those of you who have not had the pleasure of meeting, I am the Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer here at Cummins. It's my pleasure to open today's ceremony, kicking off Women's History Month and celebrating the iconic Secretary Alexis Herman. This year, much to our chagrin, Secretary Herman is retiring from the Cummins Board of Directors, where she has served on behalf of Cummins stakeholders for more than 20 years. And for the last 10, she has been our lead director. I've had the good fortune of being able to work with, alongside of, and for Secretary Herman for the last 10 years. And I have been so moved by her inspiring words, her dedication, her breaking of glass ceilings, that I penned a poem for her, which I would like to share with you. Alexis, you are both shining sun and glowing moon all at once. You, like galaxies, are limitless. You burn bright like a flaming sun, and we, your friends, your colleagues, sisters and sorors, we revolve around you like planets. You are a fixed point, unshakable, unmovable, eternally essential. You are a mountain and mountain mover all at once. You are unbendable. The wind howls, but the mountain never bows. It never crumbles. For all of us, you roll up your sleeves and turn mountains into molehills. You are the storm, fierce and raging and unstoppable. But you are also the eye, the center, the calm. In your very presence, there is peace. And the sound of your heartbeat, there is comfort. For the sake of someone else's sons and daughters, you persevered and triumphed through a struggle all your own. You've carried the weight of the world on your shoulders. Alexis, a guiding force, an eye in the storm, thank you. Thank you for knowledge and wisdom and lessons in truth. Thank you for values and ideals, for sharing and teaching confidence and pride. Thank you for guidance, for sacrifice, and thank you for fortitude. Now, let's enjoy a short video montage. Thank you.
Don't give up. Don't give in. We all have the work that we are committed to doing to make sure that the promise of America becomes the practice of America, that the promise of Cummins becomes the practice of Cummins.
Who do we have? And it's a tough area for women. I'm so glad we got a woman leading our IT area. It's a tough area, just in terms of skill sets sometimes, to find women, to find people of color in the technical areas. But we have to go down in the organization and be very clear about looking at that talent and grooming it for the future with real career assignments, asking the question, who's mentoring, who's sponsoring, who's coaching this person, so they don't get lost, going back to your earlier point, and it doesn't become the flavor of the month.
Thank you, Sharon, for setting the tone. Wasn't that a beautiful montage? For setting the tone for this Women's History Month program as we celebrate and honor the legacy of a woman that has meant so much to me and to Cummins. Good afternoon. For those that don't know me, my name is Tanya Cisco, and I serve as the Director of External Diversity Initiatives. That I could use to reflect on the impact Alexis Herman has had on me and my career. However, I have decided to share with you just three: champion, compassionate, and inspirational. The first is champion. When I was challenged to lead the U.S. Diversity Initiative in 2015, one of our first meetings was with Secretary Herman to discuss our proposed plan. As we started the presentation, we could not get past the first slide. As she leaned in to help us understand that we had to dig deeper to have a greater impact for the challenge we face. The second is compassionate. Although there were moments during that meeting that I'd said to myself, oh my goodness, what did I just sign up for? She came over to me after the end of the meeting and asked me if I had everything I needed to be successful. Her thoughtfulness and demonstrated compassion for what the team was doing meant a lot to me because it allowed me to take risk in a space I knew would be demanding and, if done correctly, very impactful. Lastly, inspirational. The career journey of Secretary Herman is nothing short of remarkable. As a Black woman that joined Cummins 16 years ago, seeing her as a member of the board, champion diversity, and having compassion for others was all the inspiration I needed to influence my decision. Secretary Herman, you were fearfully and wonderfully made. Thank you for breaking numerous glass ceilings, sharing gems of wisdom, and showing women across the globe that we are excellent and that we will achieve whatever we want.
Thank you, Tanya.
Before the feature presentation, we'll have an opportunity to enjoy personal reflections of Secretary Herman's 21-year legacy.
Thank you, Tanya.
Hello from Costa Rica. I'm enjoying my retirement as your advice, Alexis. It's an honor for me to participate in this celebration of Alexis's retirement from the Cummins Board. I first met Alexis in Washington, D.C. after she had left the Clinton administration as Secretary of Labor. I believe she was the first director that I was able to recruit after becoming chairman and CEO. It's also interesting that Frank Thomas retired as lead director and from the board early on, and the board selected Alexis to be the lead director, demonstrating her leadership qualities. It is in this role that I got to know Alexis and she got to know me. She was my advisor, my mentor, my friend. I always know where I stood with her. She was direct and constructive. I would meet with her at her house in the Washington, D.C. area, and we first talked about democratic politics and then the challenges and opportunities at Cummins. She had great wisdom and insight and could see our problems and challenges from many different perspectives. I used to say she could see around corners when no one else could. She asked really good questions that made me think broadly about the challenges that we had. She cares deeply about people and took a strong interest in many of the careers of key Cummins executives. She is an advocate for women and people of color. She understands board dynamics and was able to coach me in it being able to effectively manage the board, especially through troubling times. Cummins is very fortunate to have had Alexis as a director for more than 20 years. I am fortunate to have known Alexis, to work with her, and consider her my friend. I've been on many boards in my career, and Alexis stands out as one of the great directors. Congratulations, Alexis.
I first met Alexis Herman in 1978 or 79. We were both not quite 30, and she was the director of the Women's Bureau for the Department of Labor. And what an amazing and remarkable woman she was at such a young age. It was about 20 some plus years later that we reconnected when I joined the Cummins Board, and I have had the enormous pleasure of being her colleague for a little over 15 years now. When you sit in the same room as Alexis for as long as I have, you're just astonished at her talent and her strength and her grace and her charisma and her patience and her relentless pursuit of what's right and what's fair, and how much she cares about Cummins and how much she cares about all the employees at Cummins and how much it has meant to her to be a part of the Cummins family. And she does speak of it as her Cummins family. I think we are all going to miss her so very much. She has been like the heart and soul of this board for a good long time. Her leadership as lead director, her ability to herd all of us cats into one place and get to the right decision has been just a remarkable thing to watch. I wish her all the best.
Congratulations, Alexis, on being one of the longest serving directors of Cummins. And thank you for inviting me a few years ago to become a member of that illustrious board of directors. You've been a leader in the corporate world. You've been a great public servant, and you deserve every bit of the accolades that you're receiving at this event and in the future. Listen, I could talk a long time about all of those great things that you've done, both in the business and the public sector, but I just want to thank you for the advice that you've given me over the years. I think of the times that we were working together at Coca-Cola on the Operation Push Agreement. And I think of the times that we were working to settle a major diversity project within the company, and you chairing that board of advisors. And I could think of the day that you took seat on the Coca-Cola Company board of directors. So listen, all throughout the years, you have been right there with me and giving me advice and counsel. I guess the biggest thing, the greatest moment in that series of support roles that you played with me was the time when I became the chairman of the Executive Compensation Committee of Chevron. And I asked you your advice on how to go about that. And you said, Carl, there are 4 or 5 things that you got to remember. One is the regulatory and the legal aspect of that role. The second is to be very, very careful to make your compensation strategy based upon performance, and to make sure that your compensation strategy is equitable, to make sure that you keep the share owners' interest at heart and understand the absolute role of competitiveness in that process. So thank you for all of that great advice. You've been a trailblazer. You've always had that sure-footedness. We all thank you for your contributions to Cummins, to Coca-Cola, to corporate America, and to the world.
Hi, Alexis. This is Pamela Carter, and I wanted to take this moment to express my appreciation for your long and storied leadership, primarily as lead director at Cummins. You've made us so proud, and you've personally inspired me over the years. We both met first as public servants and then served together at Cummins, and I've had the privilege of seeing you a limited time subsequent to that. And I hope to see more of you now that you may have a little bit more time. But please know that you have inspired me in so many ways, and I'm very proud of having the privilege of knowing you. All the best to you and yours.
Hi, my name is Aisha Khalil, and I'm a member of the vocal ensemble Sweet Honey in the Rock. We are extremely happy and honored to have been asked to make this special presentation as a tribute to the iconic Alexis Herman. Secretary Herman, we pray that you will always be protected and guided by the light, and that you will always continue to receive those divine gifts of spirit, wisdom, vision, of courage and strength, that you may keep on keeping on fighting for truth, for the goodness of all people, for a health and preservation of our beautiful planet, and against the tyranny of darkness and hatred, of lies and corruption wherever they may be. May God bless you, and congratulations.
We need a nation where we understand that we are a nation. Come together, heed the call. This land, our nation, race hatred, separation. Can we find a way to come together right now? Both sides of the conversation keep the freedoms of our nation. Any point of view neglected, civil rights are not protected. Stop, question, blame, arrested. I want to know, is it fair? Is it fair? I care. You care for justice. If you dare, are we a nation divided as we fall? We need a nation, join heart to hand. We need a nation where we understand. We are a nation, come together, heed the call. Yeah, what's happening to democracy? Strange to me, we all deserve justice and equality. Does the color of your skin determine how and when you can be stopped, booked for the way that you look? Racial, this is not freedom style. Oh, got to be the time to come together right now. I care. Do you care? Stand for justice. If you dare, are we a nation? Are we a nation? Divided as we fall. We need a nation. Join heart to hand. We need a nation where we understand. We are a nation. Come together, heed the call. Heed the call. Heed the call.
They grown. They were children when they started. Children, literally. Oh, Mark's gonna speak. Mark.
Hello, I am Mark Siflin, Chief Risk Officer for Cummins Inc. and former Corporate Secretary for the Cummins Board of Directors, and Alexis Herman. Hi, Alexis. Alexis Herman in 120 seconds. That's what I've been given. Sounds like a TikTok or YouTube challenge, I think. Just a personal, when I became Corporate Secretary about 10 years ago, I didn't really know what I was doing. Tell Tom this. And then I had to get on phone calls with Alexis Herman and figure out what the board was going to do. And it was pretty intimidating. And you've heard all the great things she's done for the company, but sort of from my heart, I just want to say to Alexis Herman, everyone matters. And the way she treats people at Cummins, it doesn't matter if it's the big shots in the boardroom or it's the brand new hire, or whether you're coming to the Breaking Barriers to share your story, or the way you treated Kathy and Susan and Jana and my team. Everyone matters to you, and it doesn't matter at what level they are. And you and I were often in different places when we interact. I would try to call Alexis Herman, and she would be busy with Bill Clinton and Tony Blair. She would call me back, and I would be changing triplet diapers. And whenever I talked to her and we're trying to do our job, she always wanted to check in on me and my family and those kids. And she's like that way with everybody. And I'm going to carry a lot of memories with me of carrying your iPad password around the world so you could log in. Going to your hotel room in China to help you and Charles log in so Charles could watch the football game back home. You've always treated everybody with grace, and you may be retiring, but you will always be my lead director. I will always follow you anywhere. So thank you, and God bless.
I'm Carolyn Butler Lee, and I lead Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Cummins, and it is my privilege and honor, Secretary Herman, to reflect in the words of the phenomenal woman, Maya Angelou, and to say, continue. Continue into a world which needed you. My wish for you is that you continue. Continue to be who and how you are, to astonish a mean world with your acts of kindness. Continue to allow your humor to lighten the burden of your tender heart. Continue in a society dark with cruelty to let the people hear the grandeur of God in the peals of your laughter. Continue to let your eloquence elevate the people to heights they had only imagined. Continue to remind the people that each is as good as the other, and that no one is beneath nor above. Continue to remember your own young years and look with favor upon the lost and the least and the lonely. Continue to put the mantle of your protection around the bodies of the young and the defenseless. Continue to take the hand of the despised and diseased and walk proudly with them. In the high street, some might see you and be encouraged to do likewise. Continue to plant a public kiss on the cheek of the sick and the aged and the infirm. And count that as a natural action to be expected. Continue to let gratitude be the pillow upon which you kneel to say your nightly prayer. And let faith be the bridge you build to overcome evil and welcome good. Continue to ignore no vision which comes to enlarge your range and increase your spirit. Continue to love deeply, to dare and risk everything for the good thing. Continue to float happily in the sea of infinite substance, which set aside riches for you before you had a name. Continue, and by doing so, you and your work will be able to continue eternally. And we'll continue this with a panel discussion with our beloved Secretary Herman.
I was wondering.
With Vice President.
We practice.
Is it ever going to happen?
And Vice President Nicole Lamb Hale, our General Counsel, and Deanna Ray Marrero, CBS Vice President. We'll continue.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is my honor and pleasure to facilitate this conversation with Deanna and one of my sheroes, the Honorable Alexis M. Herman, in celebration of International Women's Day. So, Secretary Herman, since I have the floor, I'm going to take some personal privilege here to tell you how much of a role model you've been for me. And I'm delighted to brag also that you happen to be my soror of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, so I appreciate that too. And from your government service in the Clinton administration, including being confirmed by the U.S. Senate to serve as the first Black Secretary of Labor, to your groundbreaking service on the boards of some of the most significant companies in the U.S., including Cummins, I have admired you over the years. And as I was considering joining Cummins as General Counsel, that you were the lead director, emphasize lead director of the board, was a significant factor in my decision to join the company because of what it said about the company. And as I shared with you earlier this week, I am so thankful that I had the opportunity to experience your leadership firsthand, even if it was only briefly. That was a blessing for me. Thank you. So, Secretary Herman, as you know, even in 2022, female directors of all races and ethnicities continue to be a rare occurrence in the Fortune 200. So I can only imagine how rare it was in 2001 when you joined the Cummins Board, even though in classic Cummins style, you were neither the first female member nor the first Black member of the board. As you reflect on joining the Cummins Board in 2001, can you share how it felt?
Well, first of all, before I answer the question, Nicole, let me thank you and Deanna. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I just want to give a shout out to everybody that's here, to everyone that's joining us, as I understand it, from literally all around the globe in the various countries where Cummins has the privilege and the honor to do work. I'm so grateful to be here with all of you today, and my special shout out to my CEO, my leader, Tom. I've been crying all week. You know, this started at the board meeting earlier this week, and I'm like, okay, I thought I was done, you know? But I am so grateful to each of you, and I'll have more to say, hopefully, before we close the panel. My poet laureate over there will appreciate how I'm about to answer this question, okay? So, 2001. First of all, Cummins was the very first Fortune 100 board that I had the privilege to join. It was shortly after I left office that I met Tim Sosa, and it was so good to see him, even if by video, when he asked me to join the board. I knew of Cummins in terms of its history, you know, the story of Irwin Miller and the values and the legacy and his contributions in particular to the civil rights community. I knew of Jim Joseph, who at the time headed the Cummins Foundation. At that time, Jim was one of the very few leaders, African-American leaders, in corporate America. I mean, you could literally count them, you know, on your hands. So I knew Cummins by legacy. So when Tim approached me, I felt very honored to be asked. I had a couple of other boards that I was also invited to join, but Colin Powell, God rest his soul, came into my office one day, and he was sort of a coach and a mentor to me. And he advised me to only do one board. He said, when you're leaving office, get the experience, get it under your belt, choose wisely. So I chose Cummins. Now, fast forward. I'd had a great join-up experience with Tim, at the time John Walls, who was the head of research and development. We were both from Alabama, so it was always about roll tide with John. And I had a great join-up with Franklin Thomas, who was head of the Ford Foundation and then the lead director. I was not prepared, however, when I walked into my first board meeting at Cummins. And you know, I think like everyone, no matter where you've been and what you've done, anytime you're blazing new trails, there's always a little anxiety, there's a little fear. You know, you have to kind of buckle up your confidence, you know. So that was no different for me walking into the Cummins boardroom for the first time. And I'll tell you just 3 things. I could go on and on about that first experience, but I'll tell you 3 things that shall always stay with me. The first was recognizing that I had stepped into really a new world for me, right? I'm now joining the world of corporate America. And so I had to be very clear about how I carried myself into the boardroom, not to let that fear hold me back. You know, I had to find my own voice, right? As you have to do in any new situation. But the second thing that I was totally unprepared for was Hannah. Hannah was the only other woman on the board. She was the president of Chicago University. I nicknamed her Hard-Hearted Hannah. This was one tough sister. Okay? You did not go into the bathroom, ladies, to have chit-chat conversation with Hannah. Okay? Everybody respected Hannah, and everybody had a little fear, I think, Tom, right? A lot of fear of Hannah, right? I mean, she had a command of that room and those men, and it was all men except for me and Hannah, that I'd never experienced, even in government, you know? And so I said, I'm gonna be like Hannah, not quite, you know? I could never get that look like Hannah. But I said, I'm gonna be strong and I'm gonna be courageous, just like Hannah. So Hannah really helped me, believe it or not, to tap down my own fears and anxiety. The second thing I'll tell you about that experience was there was a gentleman on the board by the name of William Ruckelshaus, Bill Ruckelshaus. Now, Bill was Reagan's EPA administrator, along with other luminary roles in the Republican Party. I mean, he was a big guy, right? So I have to admit, I came in with all of the typical political stereotypes, and I'm sure he had a few about me. There were a couple others I know that had a few about me. But I learned so much from Bill. He had an engaging smile. He was smart. He knew his stuff. He knew his space. And over time, I developed a great relationship with him. I was so sad to see him leave the board. But it just reinforced for me how important it is not to bring your political stereotypes into the room, not to bring your own ignorance and history of what you think about somebody else. We lose so much in relationships because we stereotype. Because we stereotype. And I had stereotyped Bill Ruckelshaus as a member of the Reagan administration. But I came to admire and to respect him so much. And I always say, you know, throughout my journey, you have to learn to raise your own levels of understanding and tolerance and acceptance, and get rid of those cobwebs that so often hold us back from developing authentic relationships. And the third thing I'd say to you about that board meeting, And I'm always asked, especially by women, and I'm so glad we're celebrating. This is my last swan song as lead director for Women's History Month. I'm always asked, as a woman, what do you have to do to get on boards? And, what are those pearls of wisdom? Well, that's another conversation entirely. But I'll tell you this. The one lesson I always say is do your homework. Do your homework. I didn't quite do mine with Cummins, okay? I have to admit, I was led a lot by feelings. I was led a lot by emotions. The values, the story of Cummins. It's a powerful story. I had run a small business that cleaned and overhauled engines for the New York subway. That's another story, too. So I thought I knew something about the engine business. I shall never forget that first board meeting. The CFO, what was his name? Who was the CFO then, Tom? Bless his heart. He stood up there and gave this finance presentation. Cummins had about $5 or $6 billion, by the way, as a company in revenue then. He stood up there and went on and on about some horrible deal we had been a part of called Dakota, where we'd spent millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And he says, I think we have enough cash to survive maybe another 90 days. I went, what? My first board? And you're going to say you got enough cash to last maybe 90 days? I developed an appreciation for the term a cyclical business in a very different way. I mean, the North American truck market was like down. Everything was like down, okay? And I thought, my God, what have I done? But you know what? At the end of the day, I made the right decision. I didn't know enough about the business at the time and what cyclical really meant. But I learned it was about the commitment of the people. It was about staying with the intent. And it was about learning to ride the waves, to do what's right in the good times and in the tough times. You have to know the importance of hanging in there and staying the course. And I had respect from that day to this day for Cummins management and leadership that has continued to steer this ship and make the singular difference. So that's a long way of answering your question.
That's a great answer.
But,
Thank you.
There you have it.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. So now is my turn.
Okay.
And as Nico, I will take advantage.
So this is called,
We
okay,
get us
I didn't
both.
quite know
Yes.
how this
We
is
are.
going to work. Okay.
So I do.
I thought you were going to ask her some questions too.
No. Fortunately, all the questions are going to you. But I do want to say it's such a privilege. You and I haven't spent too much time together, but the few hours that we had, the knowledge and what I take out from those conversations, including having to think about it for many days, is invaluable. And it's such an honor to be sitting here with you today. Thank you. You have also this great ability of really advocating for everyone. I have heard you talk about Latinas, how we are, what is important to us, and it's impressive because I don't know that anybody else that I have met really get us the way you do. You get the essence, so it is really remarkable. But what I would like for you to do is, so you're here, can you start sharing with us how you got here? So experiences from your education or early on, how is it that you developed the perseverance and the resilience and the wisdom that you have today? I know it's loaded.
Yes. Well, you know, when I think about resilience and where I am today, I go back early on to my own childhood, growing up years in Mobile, Alabama, right? I grew up in the Jim Crow segregated South. And many leaders of Cummins have heard me tell this story. Mark always says, you got to tell that story, right? But I'm not going to tell that whole story today. Okay, I'm only going to tell it small part to answer your question of what helped to shape me, because that's really what you're asking.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I was 15 years of age, and I was expelled from school as a sophomore at my high school, Most Pure Heart of Mary High School. By the way, I'm raising money right now to save it. That's another conversation, too. I'll be calling you. But I couldn't understand, as a young Catholic girl growing up in Mobile, Alabama, how we could have a segregated school system. I decided to confront the Archbishop of our diocese, and I did it without going through all the details by hiding under the table in his dressing room at an event where all of the Catholic schools were invited, because I just had to ask the question. So I hid out under this table. I waited for the event to be over. I must admit, I didn't know it was his dressing room at the time that I was hiding in. So I considered it to be divine intervention that, that I was hiding under the table in the bishop's room. I was going to come out and find him. The Lord took me right to him, you know? So what happened was, I got expelled because obviously you don't confront the bishop in his dressing room and start inquiring about what happened and why we segregated, you know, the whole 9 yards. But something remarkable happened as a result of that event. My expulsion led to the unification of the parents in the diocese who said enough is enough. We will no longer tolerate a Catholic segregated school system. And over the course of time, you know, that year actually, lots of negotiations, the following year, we were desegregated. And so it was the first time in the state of Alabama, this is before the Civil Rights Bill actually passed, that we had a desegregated school system. But I learned something from that experience when I was expelled. I had a teacher who put her arms around me as I cried and carried my books home that day. And she hugged me. She was a nun, and she said, Alexis, you did the right thing. So I learned at an early age the importance of taking risk for what you believe in. I learned at an early age the importance of going outside of your comfort zone if you want to make a difference. I had to learn at an early age not to let others define me and who I was. You know, I had to really get very comfortable with me, with my purpose, but more importantly, it was my first lesson in learning to take risk. And I learned over the years that it's not so much about the risk that you take, it is about getting into the habit of risk-taking, of being willing to step out, to push those boundaries, right? And for me, it has been a guiding light and principle in my life. You know, and over time, the butterflies decrease, the anxiety dissipates, and it'll come back, but you're so familiar with the feelings, you're able to say, been there, done that. Been there, done that. And so you continue to push forward. And I could take you through my entire career journey and tell you those moments in time when I had to reach deep and just remember that, you know? Have courage.
Have courage.
Have courage.
Thank you. I have another question for you, Secretary Herman. So in your years with the U.S. Department of Labor, much progress was made for women in the workplace. Next week, we're observing International Women's Day, and we'll be discussing how actions create impact. What actions would you like to see to impact gender equity and women's rights?
Wow. Boy, we don't have enough time for that. Well, let me just say, first of all, this is Women's History Month, and I understand we're joined by the African American Collaborative Resource Group and the Latina, so I'm glad it's a conversation beyond for all of us, right?
Right.
And I say that to say, when we think about those who are still, pursuing the dream, because it's always a journey, particularly for women, don't get caught up in the mindset that we have arrived. And it's so easy to do that.
Yeah.
When you see you've got a woman who's vice president, you've got another woman in addition to Amy Barrett now, who's just been nominated to the Supreme Court. I celebrated along with all of you when Jen Rumsey was named our Chief Operations Officer. I look at you, I watch the careers, look at Amy. I mean, look at everybody here, right? Just how you've grown and are leading businesses in Cummins. I always make a mistake and call you something I'm not supposed to. I'm always promoting you, right? I've followed Skylar's career. She's our compliance guru now. So it's like, it's so easy to see these wonderful role models. General counsel, and look at how you've just come up through the ranks, Deanna, right? It is so easy to say we have arrived. You have to remember, everybody in here is still the exception to the norm, to the reality of what is still out there. So don't wear these blinders and think that we as women have reached the apex. No. I love the poet laureate over here, The Tale of Two Cities, Sharon. The one that's high on the hill, shining, right? That's who you are. That's what you are. But let's not forget, in the valley, it is still a tale of two cities. There are a lot of women who are still struggling, who still have so much work that they're doing to care for themselves, their families. Women are still the primary nurturers, the primary caretakers, right? So, let me not go off. So one, don't wear those blinders. Keep realizing that ours is still a journey, okay? Keep realizing that. 2, be intentional. And I'm going to give your CEO a shout out. I'm going to give Tony a shout out. I'm going to give leaders in this room a shout out. We did not get to where we are with the women in this room who are in leadership roles without leadership, without executive leadership that was intentional about what we had to do. You have to examine roles and relationships. And you have to ask the question, where do we need more women? We need more women who are CEOs. We need more women who are leading businesses. We need more women who are still not present in the main stream of this economy at the highest levels. You need mayors, you need governors. You need it all. You need people like Sharon Bonner that's going to keep pushing the envelope and reminding leaders at the table. Women have a job to do too, to remind leaders that ours is still a journey. So you've got to be critical and intentional in the examination of where else can we make the difference. And I'd say the third thing in terms of whatever that question was, I'd say that, we've got to also recognize that there's still a lot of external barriers
you know, something, the theme is breaking barriers,
Break the bias.
bias barriers, something.
Yeah, break the bias.
Break the bias. Well, to help women also move, to help families move, you know, we've got to be conscious also of the external forces in the environment that we have to still tackle to bring down those walls. I get asked so many times now about the labor market strategies, shortages, and, you know, the great resignation and all these terms that we're throwing around now because of the labor market shortages. But you know, one critical thing, it's childcare. That's a big external barrier right now that's preventing a lot of women from coming back to work. And so we've got to get very creative and think about what is it we have to do to bring down so many of those walls, those external barriers. I love the work, Tanya, that you're doing in the community with CARE and all the focus that we're putting on policies and laws that hold us back. So it's not just the internal. We've got to go external as well. And so I want us to have a more critical examination of what are those external factors as well that we can lean into as a company to help make a difference, to continue to bring down those barriers for women. You know, I could go on. You know, I was fortunate enough at a very young age as the director of the Women's Bureau for President Carter to actually promulgate the first sexual harassment regulations in this country. I didn't know what sexual harassment was. I have to be very honest with you know. But I had to learn. I had to study. I had to go figure it out, you know. And so it's still a journey of being open to what it is you have to keep learning and doing to make the difference.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll pick up on the break the bias, and that was my next question, but I want to bring to this next level. One thing that you have done is being persistent, and what you are saying and telling us is breaking the bias, you know, takes an effort. And there will be barriers, and there will be people out there that are not ready. You recently shared a story that happened to you not that far, actually last fall, that brought back that resistance that we will have, and now how you approach it, that was the takeaway from me that day. So would you mind sharing that, or what you learned, or what you're thinking about that?
Oh, I remember that. That was the executive leadership
Development.
The executive. Yeah, it was a shocking moment for me, and it was a great reminder that we're still in this process of breaking barriers. I have a lovely home in the mountains outside of Washington, D.C. in the Shenandoah Valley. It has really saved me during COVID, I will tell you. I could just get in my car and drive there. So last fall, I was driving to my home there. It's in rural Virginia. It's literally in the mountains. It's a predominantly rural white community. But I love the open air. I love the mountains. And there was this beautiful array of red trees that were turning in the fall, and I was just determined to stop and get that picture. And so I pulled over to the side of the road with my cousin in the car, and I didn't really pay attention to, you know, where I'd stopped, but I stopped on the side of the road, and I'd stopped in front of a little rural shack, really, an old family home on the side of the road. And I was busy getting out of my car. And I have to say, you know, I've arrived. I'm driving in a white Lexus, you know, 2018, 19, whatever that car is. You know, so I didn't look shabby, you know, and I had on my ski clothes, you know. I don't ski, but I like to wear the ski. I like to dress up in them, you know. But anyway, and I heard this this man, nigger, get off of my property. Get off of my property. And he had a gun. I cannot tell you the last time I've been called a nigger. Not that I haven't been called it growing up in Alabama, but it's been a many a day since I've been called that. I was literally frozen. I could not move. But then I had to quickly manage my rage. I had to quickly manage my rage. And that was the growth of it, you know? And so I took a deep breath. I got back in my car. My cousin, bless her heart, she was like this. But I had to have one moment of defiance. So I didn't say anything. But I got back in my car. I made a U-turn. I went and parked on the other side of the street. I got out of the car and I took my pictures. I was determined to take my pictures. And that's what I did. And he stood there watching. And I turned, I smiled, I nodded, and I got back in my car. And I say that to say, for me, it was a powerful reminder that I don't care how far you go. You know, I don't care how far you go. We still have work to do in this country, you know. We still have work to do to heal the nation, to acknowledge that these attitudes still exist, you know. But the difference for me now is that I don't let it throw me. I don't let it take me back to those moments of anger. I've learned to continue to stay focused on what I have to do, you know. And, you know, you talked about my experience with the Latina community. I guess I've learned, and I'm grateful. You know, years ago, early in my work, I started a program that was called the Minority Women's Employment Program. And it worked with African American women, Hispanic women, Asian women, to help them get into managerial jobs. The very first, by the way, in corporate America. This was in the 1970s. They didn't exist. You know, we got the first woman into Delta Airlines, African American. She was an accountant. The first Hispanic woman in Texas, Shell Oil Company. I mean, they were such pioneers that I can remember their faces and places. But I learned during that work that the fact that I was black and female was a gift. It was a gift. Because I had to learn what it meant to deal with both race and sex issues, and to acknowledge that racism and sexism were real, okay? But it helped me not to have what I would call an either-or mindset, but a both-and mindset. And it helped me to learn to navigate across differences. And it helped me to understand that we all bring our cultural histories and experiences to the table. And I learned so much counseling those women, those Latina women. You know, their sense of family, we all love our families, okay? But when they say La Familia,
La Familia.
it means something special, you know? So I couldn't coach them the way I did the other women. I had to really worry about child care. And, you know, not that all women don't worry about it, but the extended family relationships that were always there, right? I couldn't take for granted that sometimes where I expected African American women to be so strong and so tough and just to push through and wear the mask, and we all know what it means to wear the mask, I couldn't have that expectation when I was dealing with Latina women, because their feelings and their emotions were so real and so powerful. So I just learned that when we talk about women, even in this Women's History Month of celebration, we as women come in all different sizes, colors, and shapes, right? I had to learn in dealing with white females that their experience was really different from mine, in that they had role models oftentimes in their homes that we didn't have. And so I learned to draw on that strength and those insights, right? Because we weren't in the business world. We didn't know.
Right.
You know? So everybody has something to bring to the table. And we make a mistake when we put all women in one category. So one of the things, I think you asked me something about going forward with women's history, or one of those questions. One of the learnings has to be that learn to see all women for the uniqueness of who they are and what they bring to the table. It's so important.
Well, Secretary Herman, thank you so much for all the wisdom you've shared, and it's just been so rich. And so we have about 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to ask one last question before we go to Q&A.
Oh, we're going to have to Q&A?
Yes,
Good.
we are. We couldn't let you get away without having Q&A from the audience.
Sharon's giving me that look in the boardrooms. Right. I'm sometimes accused of asking too many questions. You know?
So what I'd ask as a closing question before we go to Q&A is, looking back on your 21 years on the Cummins Board, what change or changes are you most proud of?
Oh, wow. My goodness. First of all, it's Women's History Month.
Yes.
And Tom said in the institutional shareholders meeting we had 5 women. We have 6 because Jen Rumsey has now joined our board, right?
That's right.
So to think of the days of just me and Hannah, to know that we are a board of 6 women. I have to give you this pivot that I shared with the board the other night. Carla Harris, who is our newest board member, very smart woman from Wall Street, Morgan Stanley, was leaning against the wall outside the women's bathroom from the boardroom. And I said, "Are you okay? Is everything all right? What's going on? Why are you leaning against the wall?" She said, "There's a line in the women's bathroom."
Isn't that something?
Oh my God.
Yay!
A line. A line. I couldn't believe it. So obviously, from that first day, I'm so proud that we've grown and we really represent the best and the brightest now, I think, of who we are. That $5 to $6 billion company that I joined, it's now $20 billion and growing and growing and growing.
I think it's 25.
Yeah. We're on our way. We've got new business opportunities now. I think I'm leaving at such a great moment in time. When I think about new power and all that we're embracing for the future, right? And what we're going to do. I mean, it's like the world is our oyster. It's before us now. And I know from those early days that we've got the leadership and the right team on the field to seize that moment, right? I am so proud of the fact that we are having a conversation with African American, with women, with Latina leaders, the diversity of who and what we are today. not just in terms of gender and ethnicity, but geography, how we think. We're talking to people around the globe right now. We are so rich in terms of our culture and in terms of our heritage. My very first African American meeting with Cummins leadership probably have been in a room about this size. And not one executive from Cummins was there. That wouldn't even happen today. Now you've got sponsors, you've got mentors, you've got a program of development, and we are so intentional today, right? So I just pray that we continue to stay intentional, to stay focused, not to rest on our laurels, right? But to continue to press forward. You know, I am so proud of the company that we have become. I look back on these 20 years now, and it is just unbelievable for me to look in this room, to look at the camaraderie, to know that we can have courageous conversations, that we can be honest with one another. That is so important, and that we can admit our mistakes. Get the lessons and move on. That's what you have to do.
Well, thank you, Secretary Herman, and thank you, Deanna. And I will now turn the program over to Avril Schutte, who will facilitate questions from the audience.
Hello, Avril.
It's Avril, thank you.
Excuse me, sorry.
Avril.
No worries.
Avril.
I thought it was Avril, but you know, that's fine.
It's Nicole's fault.
All right, so if you have a question, if you'll just raise your hand and I will pop over to find you. We have one right here.
Good afternoon, Secretary Herman. We have heard from so many great leaders today who are inspirations in their own right, call you inspirational. Nicole even called you her shero. Can you name, someone who's been an inspiration for you or even your shero, and more importantly, why?
Well, I use the term, and some Cummins folk have heard me use the term foundational mentors, okay? That's because you never outgrow your need for mentors and someone who inspires you, who keeps pushing you. I don't care where you are. So I had 3 foundational mentors. The first was my first boss. She was a Catholic nun at Catholic Charities in my first job. And she let me do anything I wanted to do as a young social worker with Catholic Charities. I could not see myself doing the traditional work of a social worker. I knew I had to be out in the community, making the connections. I used her because she was my first boss. And I learned the importance from her of empowering people. We use the term innovation now. We didn't use that then. But she really let me innovate in a way that I didn't know was possible, right? She encouraged my spontaneity. She encouraged my ideas. She encouraged my authentic self. And I naively thought all bosses were supposed to be like Rosemary, okay? So she was the first. The second was a white male by the name of Ray Marshall, who went on to become Jimmy Carter's labor secretary. That's how I ended up in Washington as the director of the Women's Bureau. But Ray took an interest in my work in the shipyards of Pascagoula, Mississippi, which was really my first foray into getting young people into jobs, young African-American males who broke the boundaries in the apprenticeship trade. At the time, he was head of the School of Economics at the University of Texas. He heard about it. He came to interview me and write about my work. But growing up in Mobile in the Deep South, I'd never had a real conversation with a white man before, And I used to jokingly say, and Mark's heard me say this, my most authentic conversation was in the confessional
with a Catholic priest going, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," right? But Ray let me into his world, right? I mean, I just got to ask him questions, and I got an understanding of what it meant to be in a two-way mentoring relationship, right? And so for me, I learned to have courage and to find my voice, to take risks, to talk to somebody who was very different from me. And it was really because of that early relationship that I ended up going to Washington, D.C. He's the one who brought me there with Jimmy Carter's permission. But that was an inspiration for me of going out again beyond my comfort barrier and finding my voice, no matter who I'm talking to. And the third, of course, is someone that a lot of the women in this room know, and it's Dorothy Height. Dorothy Height was she was the woman in the big six of the civil rights movement, along with Martin and Whitney Young and the leadership. She was the only woman. She was the president of the National Council of Negro Women, which is the largest African-American women organization. But it was Dorothy Height who really taught me what it meant, oftentimes, to be the only woman in the room, not to be afraid to let my voice be heard, to never take risk, to know that you don't get any place in this world alone. And particularly when I was in Washington, she taught me the importance of coalitions, of being bipartisan, that you have to learn to work across the aisle, that you have to learn to navigate differences, and that there's a way that you do it. She used to say to me, "Alexis, people who do, don't. And people who don't, do." And I was like,
what is that?
What are you talking about? And she would say to me, people who do have power and who really know who they are and what they're striving for, they don't have to flaunt it. They don't have to flaunt it. But those who don't have it, they're the ones who have the need to do it, to show out, to show off, you know. And so she gave me a sense of what it meant to stay humble.
Yeah.
She taught me the importance of listening. And she also taught me the importance, especially as a woman, that we have to lift as we climb.
Mm-hmm.
She said that's a special role and obligation that we have.
Well, thank you so much, Secretary Herman, for sharing with us today. It is such a rich experience, and I'm going to miss you. I know we're all going to miss you. So we have a few more recorded reflections to share, so get your Kleenex ready.
Okay.
We have a few more.
Is it, you have it?
I thought that was a good way
and
to
that
end.
will be followed. And then following those recorded reflections, we will hear from our CEO, Tom Lineberger.
Okay. Well, in case I'm weeping again, since you all have had me,
Where is it?
I have to say a special thanks to someone who's been standing in the back of the room that I happen to know who's done your person's work to pull all of this together, and that's Michelle Cooper. Thank you, Michelle.
Hi, Alexis. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there today to celebrate with you and your legacy at Cummins. I remember very clearly when you joined the board in 2001. I had just been named the general counsel and the board secretary, and frankly, I had no idea what I was doing. What I do remember is how supportive and kind you were of me as I transitioned to that role, And frankly, I know that I would not have been as successful at Cummins if both you and Georgia had not advocated on my behalf. So thank you so much. There was a whole group of senior women who were really excited to find out that you were going to join the board, because we knew we were going to be able to get political gossip from you in Washington. What we didn't realize was that you also had this way of getting information from us about what was going on at the company. And the way you did that was you would call meetings in the ladies' restroom to find out what was really going on. I know that others are going to talk about your long legacy at Cummins, but the one that I want to point out is how different the board looks today than when you joined in 2001. It remains a group of talented, dedicated individuals who care deeply about the organization. I think that's because of your leadership as board director, and for that, Cummins owes you a very large debt of gratitude. Enjoy your celebration today. You deserve every bit of it.
Alexis, when I think about you, I think of 3 words: amazing, inspirational, and a blessing. The first time I met you was at a tech women's leaders conference at the Tech Center in Columbus, Indiana. And you shared your story with us, and I was just amazed and inspired by what you'd done in your life at that point and how you'd stood up for what you thought was right and worked tirelessly throughout your whole life to make a positive difference for others and to drive fairness and equality. And I've seen you now work as a member of our board and lead director to listen, to bring people together, to put the real issues on the table and ensure that the company is doing what's right for our business and our people. And you're a blessing because I've had the benefit of having you in my own life, Alexis, not only to watch and learn from you, but to personally benefit from your investment in me and your guidance in me and your encouragement of me in my own career. I want to wish you all the best as you leave our board and say thank you. I will forever have a part of you and me and be grateful for what you've done for Cummins and for me personally and for people around this country. You are amazing.
Oh, that was nice, Jen and Maria. Wow.
Alrighty.
Okay, once more with
Here we go.
Here we go again.
Here we go again. You got extra tissues up there?
Yeah, I got right. Pass them over.
Well, it was really fun, wasn't it, to go down memory lane there with Tim and everybody. And you were talking about Hannah Gray. I'm pretty sure I peed my pants first time I presented Hannah Gray. I mean, at least a little, I'm pretty sure. She was a scary person. And you were talking about you gave some amazing advice about and some thoughts about where we need to go in the future with women, and I was thinking to myself, here we are, Women's History Month. What's a white man got to say about that? And I thought the only thing I would have added to year 3 was the 4th one, which is urgency. One thing I've noticed is that those of us with privilege are just not as urgent as those without. I mean, that's obvious, right? It's really obvious to say. And yet, it's not as obvious to those with the wind at the back. We're working on it. We'll get to it. But the question is, at what pace? At what pace? How many days? How many weeks? How many months? How many years? And when I talk to all the leaders around, the CEOs I meet at the Business Roundtable or government leaders around the world, everybody says we'd all be better off if we had more women in the workforce participating equally. We'd have all these great things. And yet the pace at which we're moving to make that reality is just a snail's pace. Like if you just disappeared off this earth for 10 or 20 years and came back, I'm not sure you'd see the movement. unless you were sitting in like one room or the other. And I think that's what you were getting at, that we just can't lose track of the fact that the movement we have in one room is not the same. So I guess for those of us that maybe have our hand on a lever of power or two, I just think much more urgency would be the only thing I would add to it. But yeah, anyway, just a thought on since it's Women's History Month. I want to say that I'm just not ready to say goodbye. I just, so for me, the emotion of it was hard the other night. It's going to be harder today because I know this is maybe my last one. I think my emotion comes because I'm an old man, and you know, us men, we don't really deal with emotions well. So when we get old, it all comes rushing in. We just go from teenager to old man. All that adult part gets left out, right? So I notice it all the time now. I'm just like, man, why am I crying? I said, I don't even know. I'm crying. But it happens, so you just have to deal with it, I guess. But I am going to miss her. I've just been, a lot of people said it, I just am so grateful to be part of Alexis' remarkable life. It's just, it's a life that, it's a wonderful accident. Sometimes I sit and see the pictures of Alexis with the Big Six or with Bill Clinton and with all these, and I think, wait, that's my boss, that's my partner. And it is a wonderful accident. I'll never forget the first time I went to go see her in her house, and I was in the little waiting room. She's got this little room. You come right in the door, housekeeper lets you in, you go in the door, and you sit in this little room, and you look around, and there's Alexis, her portrait from the White House, that portrait. And then the one with pictures with her with all the famous people, like, oh, that's right. She's the former labor secretary. Like, you just realize that you're in the company of, you're in the big time, right? You're in the big time. And then, of course, you meet with her, and she looks at you with those eyes that she looks at you. She holds your stare, and she sees you. And you think, she sees me. She cares about me. Little old me. And that's her superpower. Her superpower is to see you like nobody else sees you. It's the same person who's walking down the White House thing with Bill Clinton and all that sees you. And that ability to work between those, to see you no matter who you are, Kathy Beecham, me, whoever it is, white, black, brown, woman, man, tall, short, mostly taller. But I do worry about the vertebrae in her neck sometimes. But sorry, that's not fair. But couldn't help myself. But she sees all of us, and it is a remarkable, great fortune to me. And I think when I reflect on it, I think, okay, we all know she's famous, but she's one of the greatest leaders of our generation. If we just look around and say, who's had a bigger impact in the public sector, private sector, on workers, from the bottom of the economy to the top? She's helped people in shipyards get jobs, and she's helped educate emotionally adolescent CEOs into their adulthood. At least two of them that from this session, and I mean that. Like Tim said it. Like, I was learning how to be a CEO when I met Alexis Herman, and I can speak for. I was definitely learning how to be a CEO when I met Alexis Herman. When she brought me into her tea room in that house and talked to me about, you need to sometimes chill out and just be patient for things. Right? Think just like your most basic things about how to be a CEO. These were education sessions that I'll just never forget. There's no way I'm standing here today without the leadership and coaching and help from Alexis Herman. And it wasn't just advice, by the way. Carl talked about advice. Yes, there's good advice. But there was advice and support and help and love, not just advice. Because a lot of people have advice. Not nearly as many people have love. And I think the reason, maybe, that she will not get the credit she deserves as one of the greatest leaders of our generation is because the way she helps and supports and loves is to lift everybody else up. She says that I'm her CEO, and she means that I'm her leader, but I think I'm her CEO because she's the one that made me. I'll always be her CEO. And so my fame, or whatever I've accomplished, she's a big part of it, but people won't know that. They won't see that. That behind me, helping me step up and be the man I should be, is her. They won't know that about Tim. They won't know that about Bill Clinton. They won't know that about a lot of people. Most of the time when we come to a great decision in the boardroom on a complicated topic, all of us remember that Alexis talked to us, but we still thought it was our idea. She probably knows it wasn't our idea, but we sure feel like it was our idea. And that's what I mean, like, that a lot of that stuff is created because Alexis helps get it done. And that love and that energy and that positivity and that support and that, intellectual power and all the rest of that and all those capabilities you have to make people feel like they can connect with someone who's different than them, Republicans and Democrats and all the rest. That happens, and she isn't always at the front of that to say, see, I made all that happen. But she did. And on Cummins, we just remember the few numbers that you got to hear today. When Alexis joined the board, we were $5 billion and we didn't make any money. By the way, after he told her, Kiran Patel told her we have 90 days before we're out of money, they made me CFO. Here's the checkbook, but don't use it too much.
That's true.
I think he went to work for a tax software company or something and said, here you go. That was not the easiest time in our career, was it? But anyway, that's what we were, $5 billion and barely break even, $25 billion and all the world in front of us. And our lead director, while we built a company that's got more diverse leadership and all the things she mentioned, we also built a company that's robust and strong and growing. And in case you're wondering if, focusing on are you focusing on the results or are you focusing on the diversity? Those are the same thing. And I think this company is a result of that leadership by her. She mentioned, by the way, that you have to be intentional. Sometimes the difference between being intentional and conspiratorial are not that different. So she and I conspired to ensure that we got the board diversity that we wanted. Sometimes because the board said that was a good idea, sometimes because they didn't know we were doing it. But then nonetheless, they're all happy we got there.
That's intentional.
Right, that's intentional. No, it was definitely our intention. I'm just saying that sometimes you got to show people how good it is before they know. Anyway, so her impact on the company is obviously profound. You could hear that from all the leaders, from the numbers. And, to walk out of a leadership role for 20 years and see that kind of improvement in the company's fortunes, in the future, and the ability for that company to sustain, to look behind at the legacy of leaders that you've left, all of whom see you as critical to their own personal development and have the kind of gratitude that we all do. I hope you're proud of that, because it is amazing.
Enormously.
Amazing. And just personally, you've changed my life in so many ways. I think I'm a better CEO. I feel better about it anyway. I know I'm a better husband and a father. I know I'm a better friend. She introduced me to my leadership coach, Pam Curtis, so my second biggest influence in my life. So, you've been a guiding light for me for so long, and I know that I just kind of think to myself, if I could just meet your expectations for how one looks at people and sees them, how they care about them, how they think I can make a difference if I just step up and lead. If I just meet those expectations, I know I'll be proud.
I am proud of you.
Mm-hmm. I told you it wasn't going to be easy. It means a lot to me, but I would just say that I always feel like that's that guiding light I can use, and just really grateful that we had that chance to be together and work together. I'll never forget it, and I'll always be your CEO. Yeah, I think we're closing. Is what I'm getting. I'm getting a sign that says "Wrap it up. Time to close."
That's about time, yeah.
Yeah. It's time. I do want to say I want to join Alexis and thank everybody who joined, from wherever in the world you joined, from here, from there. It's really important that we recognize that the legacy of Alexis Herman's impact on this company, but also the expectation that creates for all of us to be the kind of leader that she would expect of us. And I think now, looking at International Women's Day and Women's History Month, we have a long way to go on this journey. And every day we waste is a day wasted. So let's just figure out, let's be intentional. Let's put our own goals. Let's make sure we're being intentional about what we can do to do what Alexis would do. Step forward, make change, be brave, take risks. Let's move it. Thank you so much.